thanks for that question about the response of the European institutions to the COVID-19 crisis. This is quite an interesting time to be living in Europe, as you can imagine. And because of my background, where I spent a lot of time in the States for my PhD, I can't help but compare the two countries. The US as a country and the European Union as this emergent phenomenon that looks federal but isn't federal, right? And so one of the things which I kept on thinking about in preparation for this video is this idea of subsidiarity. And I think this is basically the key word for understanding what's going on in Europe at the moment with the response. Right? So the European Commission comes in for a lot of criticism initially, and people feel like they should be doing more. And then people start to get informed and they realize, well, actually, the European Commission has no authority to take action on public health issues. There's just no foundation on which they can do anything. And so if you want to understand how the Commission is able to contribute to the response to the coronavirus crisis, it is actually an economic response. Right? It's basically the only thing that they're empowered to do. And so what we see them doing in response to this health crisis is basically an economic policy, a set of economic policies. So what are they concerned about? They're concerned about the free movement of people. Right, one of the fundamental pillars of the internal market, because this is the first thing that member states are concerned about. Right, they want to control movement across their borders and potential further infections. They're worried about ensuring, or they're worried about the application of state aid rules, right, because they know that a lot of firms are going to suffer as a result of the crisis measures that are being taken to basically halt the spread of the virus, which is going to prevent firms from operating and is going to affect their competitiveness and the likelihood of survival even potentially, and that national governments are going to want to support their domestic economies. And so what this requires, of course, is state intervention, and this comes into direct conflict with state aid rules. And the European Commission has almost immediately been very flexible in that sense and set in motion a number of initiatives to signal this flexibility and understanding for national member states' challenges in this respect. And then it's almost like we have 2008 again, right? We see all of these other mechanisms that were previously used for an economic crisis being put in place to support national governments and national economies because governments are going to need to be implementing expensive policies domestically. And so we end up with the Commission and also the other financial institutions of the European Union needing to think about things like the European Stability Mechanism and the rules that they have there about what member governments can and can't do in terms of their national budgets. And we also see the mobilization of European money in support of national government responses, because all responses are national in the end. So it's been a fascinating time. And then the final observation I'd like to make about that is it's amazing how many of the old battles have re-emerged, which have previously been battles fought within an economic context, right? So something about the socialization of costs or of bad policies, if you like, or national economic challenges that individual member countries can no longer manage, right? So you see the northern countries again be resisting some kind of European bond to finance the response, whereas there are a number of southern countries who have always been for some form of European bond to support member states when they're in economic challenges, which is basically some kind of solidarity mechanism financially. And so it's a repeat of all of those debates that we previously had with the 2008 financial crisis. And it made me think a little bit about the former British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, and that famous statement of his when a reporter asked him, what explains, unfolding politics? And his response was, events, my dear boy, events, right? And so you see member countries seeking to pursue policy goals that they've had for a long time because they've got a new crisis, which may open up a new window. And this time it's a different kind of crisis. Right? It's not an economic crisis where the ground rules have already been hashed over so many times that everyone knows what the arguments are. It's a completely different framing within which old policy goals might still be achieved. Okay, so that's my take on the, let's say, the European story about the COVID-19 crisis. Okay, so I guess the second question that I have to address is the idea of what should you be thinking about as an American business person, considering entering into business activities in the European Union. Well, during the COVID-19 crisis, I suspect you're not going to be doing too much of that. But let's say we're just after the crisis, and you see opportunities in the marketplace, and you're wondering how to take advantage of them. One of the important things to remember is that the European Union is creating an environment where you have a large market that you can access, but that market is not the same in all places. Right? And so the degree to which you're going to understand and feel comfortable within the business environment in Europe is going to differ depending on which country you choose to make your first entry through. And for this reason, it's why, for example, Australia and many other Anglophone countries have formerly, before Brexit, used to use the UK as a launchpad country into the European Union. Now, that gateway is no longer available, right? And so now you have a rich tapestry of countries to choose from in which to set up your shop for the first time. And because of the European Union, you face very similar rules regardless of where you are, and pretty good access to other European Union countries, but the context is going to could be quite different, right? If you choose Paris over Berlin, it's going to be different. But let's imagine you choose an Eastern European capital compared to Berlin or to Paris, right? These are going to be very different environments. So that's the first thing I would think of. And I always think of this not as a negative thing, but as an opportunity. It's really it's the unrealized opportunity, I think, of the European Union. That this diversity creates the possibility for you to think about, where should I locate different operations to maximize my opportunities within the European Union? So you can disaggregate your value chain across diverse locations with very different economic profiles in terms of labor costs, in terms of skill sets. I know of firms that, for example, like Poland or Polish cities for back office IT intensive, programming intensive operations, because the education system, due to the history of the country, is well prepared for providing that kind of labor. And you might choose a different European country for, say, your marketing activities, because you need a creative class, for want of a better word, people who are trained to think in that way, or that way, oriented in that way. So you might choose Amsterdam, or you might choose, I don't know. There are a number of cities who have that, which have that kind of label attached for market-oriented, customer-oriented creativity and generating business. And so that's my only thing. My primary message to you. It's a single market. It's integrated formally, but there's significant diversity within it, and that's an opportunity that should be thought about carefully. So thank you very much for the opportunity to give you a short message. Again, this year, I'm delighted that you use our book as part of the course with Professor Doria, and I look forward to doing this again next year, although I probably won't be speaking to your cohort, and I wish you all the best in your future careers and what might come next for you.